Channel 11, TV, that's entertainment.
That said negotiations would continue as usual on Thursday, and the communists say the Nixon administration will be responsible for continuing the war past November 1st, when the ceasefire would have taken effect. It looks like none of Canada's four major parties has emerged from Monday's federal elections with a parliamentary majority, and the Liberal Party, which dominated for the last 4 years under Prime Minister Trudeau, lost more than 40 seats. The heat of the presidential campaign is becoming more personal.
2 yards out.
On the thousands of polling places around the nation, vote totals go into a new computer system. For instantaneous results, reported and explained by Chancellor and Brinkley, stay with NBC News Election Night. Coverage begins with NBC Nightly News.
There's a curious dimension where sound and time exist together, where sound is suspended in time. This place is found in a tape recorder, inside a cassette deck, a car stereo player, and a pocket cassette recorder. A small device yet incredibly faithful, magically priced at $79.95. You can hear these sounds again and again. They're found at the end of a singular journey to a nearby place called Radio Shack.
Radios, stereos, recorders, everything in sound.
This is Chrysler Plymouth's new styling center. And this is the new 1973 Plymouth Fury. Isn't it beautiful? And part of the beauty of it is the way they put the engine together. In a week's time, 15,000 V8s go through here, and they test every one of them with these. They're called engine function testers, and they have electronic sensors. Nobody else has them. These electronic gizmos find things wrong that people don't find, and they find them before they ever put the engine in the car. That's the kind of thing that makes the 73 Fury run better inside while it looks better outside. Isn't that the kind of car we've all been looking for?
Plymouth Fury. Extra care in engineering. It makes a difference.
It's Up, Up, and Away for High-Flying Spy, a new Disney adventure tonight.
Welcome to United's Friendship Island. More flights to Hawaii than anybody. And every Honolulu flight, a 747 with 3 lounges where you can sip some and smile some and make some happy talk. You eat Trader Vic Polynesian goodness only on United. Fly the friendly skies of United. Your land is our land.
KNXT Channel 2.
The NFL Today, sponsored by State Farm Mutual. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And by Radio Shack, over 1,600 stores, the nationwide supermarket of sound. And by AC Spark Plug. AC keeps you going when the going's tough.
Hello, Jack Whitaker and Pat Summerall in CBS Control. And as we all know, for all the skill and strategy in football, and really in life too, luck is pretty important, and 2 football teams last Sunday were kind of lucky.
Kind of lucky, I think, is putting it mildly, Jack. The Eagles won their first game on a rebound from Kansas City, and the Jets were able to pull out the game against Baltimore on a rebound, so to speak. 2 deflected passes. Weeb Eubank, the Jet coach, has always said he'd rather be lucky than good, and he got some of it last week. Joe Namath, by his own admission, just put up a hope shot in the direction of Eddie Bell. It bounced off Colt cornerback Charlie Stukes as Jerry Logan was waiting to make an interception into the hands of Eddie Bell. And Eddie, from the time he put his hands on the ball,
everybody. I'm Gil Stratton here at CBS Control at the Oakland Coliseum, and with me is the assistant to the owner of the Los Angeles Rams, Don Klosterman. And Don, I think that you're one of the few guys who has been through the American Football League, the American Conference, and now back home to the National Conference.
Well, first of all, Gil, it's nice to be back home in Los Angeles, but you're right, I did start with the American Football League during its first year, and I think that the eminence, the breakthrough of defenses have a lot to do with the American Football League. Early in the American Football League, we used to use a lot of man coverage. That means man-for-man coverage, and we had a prolific amount of scoring in the early days, and I think because of that, the American Football League went to a zone-type defense, which you now find, I would say, almost 95% of the National Football League teams using today. But the reason for that, as I say, was we didn't have the big linemen that the National Football League had in those days, so we had to camouflage our coverages and defenses, and therefore we evolved rather into the zone-type defense. Now I think that everybody in pro football uses it. The last two to come over to it were the Oakland Raiders and the Dallas Cowboys. So it really tries to stop the home run, and anyway, that's basically how the American Football League got started as far as the defenses go. But the American Football Conference, as compared to the National, I think is fairly similar. I think that we really have a competitive situation now in the National Football League, and it's so great to be back to Los Angeles to be a member of the National Football Conference. So I think that all of pro football is so competitive now that breaks make a great deal of difference, also injuries.
I think perhaps when you first went into the American League, did you really think that it was going to survive, or was it just one of those things that you were hoping?
Well, the first 2 years I really had some doubts, some skepticism as to whether or not we would prevail. But I think when we got the television contract, the famous one from NBC, that I felt at that time that we were here to stay.
That was the breakthrough then?
Absolutely, in my judgment.
Speaking of defense, as you were a moment or two ago, I think that the American League was the league that started the so-called bump and run.
Yes, we featured that a great deal. Also, we used a lot of safety blitzing and a lot of variances of defenses because we didn't have the quality type linemen overall that the National Football League had. The National Football League used to use what we called a vanilla defense, a 4-3 and just cover man for man. But because of a lack of sufficient big, strong defensive linemen, we had to camouflage a great deal, and therefore some of these new defenses, which you now see a great deal of, really evolved from the American Football League.
It appears that the draft is certainly evening things up the way it's intended.
Yes, it has, and some of the great thing is to see some of the expansion teams, the weaker teams of the American Football League that merged into the National Football League, playing good football and upsetting good football teams.
Your old team that you left to come with the Rams, the Baltimore Colts, they've had some problems this year. In your opinion, what's the reason?
Well, I think that they just had too many major changes. Of course, when Carroll Rosenblum left the team, I think it left a great void because Carroll is very involved and the players were very close to him. And I think that he had a lot to do with the overall attitude of the team. We were not a team that had a lot of ups and downs. We played pretty consistent football. And I think with the new ownership that there wasn't the involvement. The players didn't feel that it was no longer the family atmosphere that we had in Baltimore. So I think that's one of the major reasons. Also, I don't think you bench Johnny Unitas because he is great. He's had a very good year. But I guess they're thinking of the future and have just forgotten all about the present.
I was wondering, for Ram fans, of course, the Rams are now in first place in the Western Division of the NFC. They have the third best record in the entire National Football League. Do you have any changes contemplated for the future that you could share with the fans?
Well, I don't think so. I feel that we do have a very, very fine overall football team. I think we certainly have to be aware of our quarterback situation for the future. We have Roman and of course, Roman Gabriel. Everybody knows that, and Pete Beathard. But I think we have to think about the future in this next draft, or either through trades or through the draft. We're going to have to come up with a young quarterback.
So you'd say that the first need then for the future would be a quarterback?
Yes, in my judgment.
Anybody you can tell us about?
Well, nobody in particular. There are about 5 good quarterbacks coming up in this year's draft, and we hope to have an opportunity to either, as I say, get one through the draft or else trade for a young quarterback in football.
Don Klosterman, thank you very, very much for being with us. It's great to have you back in Los Angeles.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Don Klosterman, ladies and gentlemen, the assistant to the owner of the Los Angeles Rams. And we'll be back with the latest scores as the NFL Today continues.